The MCU is the most popular movie franchise of all time. Everyone has at least heard of it, and most people have seen the movies. A lot of people think that they are overrated, and some people think they are masterpieces. I'm somewhat in between, but I lean more on the side that they are good movies. So I thought it would be a good idea to make a video where I rank all of the MCU movies. I'm not doing shows because I haven't seen all of them, and I don't plan to. And also, don't forget that this is my opinion. Coming in last place is The Incredible Hulk. This movie was the second MCU movie, and you can really tell because it's so different from all the other ones. It's not fast-paced at all. It's painfully slow and lacks action. In fact, there's only a few action scenes in the movie, and that would be fine if the other aspects of the film were good, but they were not. Edward Norton does not fit as the Hulk to me, and this is more of a personal thing, but I can't picture the main character from Fight Club as Bruce Banner. Anyway, I'm really glad they switched to Mark Ruffalo because he's way better as the Hulk. Also, the main character's chemistry is just not good. They do not bounce off each other well at all. This movie is the only MCU movie that I consider bad, which is why it's in last place. Where The Incredible Hulk is bland and empty, Thor the Dark World is full of personality, but that doesn't mean it's good. It still feels like an MCU movie, and it is fairly entertaining. My problem are the characters. The main characters of the first two Thors are not great in my opinion. Thor is too serious. Jane is not interesting, and her and Thor have no chemistry. Thor's warrior friends are very boring. The only good character is Loki. In fact, Loki is really good in this movie. He's as entertaining and mischievous as ever. The action scenes and fights are actually very good, and the comedy isn't terrible. But once again, the characters are not good. Also, Malekith might be the worst Marvel villain. I don't have much to say about number 25, which is Eternals. It's the second newest Marvel movie and one of the least memorable. It introduces a lot of new interesting stuff, but to me it doesn't do a great job at getting us invested in it. I think it's an interesting idea, but sadly with what we got, I just feel very disappointed and I wish we could have gotten more. It's not the worst Marvel movie, but I would not say it is good. The original Thor is a lot like Thor the Dark World. It's pretty average overall and has bland and uninteresting characters. As soon as we get to Earth, this movie just turns into a mediocre romance, fish-out-of-water story, and it does not work for a Marvel movie. There's not that much action in this one either, unlike the Dark World, and everything else doesn't make up for it. The only reason this is above Thor the Dark World is that the villain is way better. Loki is millions times more interesting than Malekith, but even he can't save this boring movie. There is a lot to break down in Iron Man 2. A bit too much for a video like this. Tony Stark is still as hilarious and charismatic as the first one. Black Widow is pretty interesting. I thought the evil business guy was pretty entertaining, but the negatives are almost infinite. Whiplash is one of the worst Marvel villains. He's boring, has an uninteresting motive, and does not have a good relationship with Tony. The action scenes are surprisingly bland. They don't have personality, and some of them are insanely dumb, especially the Tony and Rhodes fight. And I really hate Pepper. I don't know why, but I don't like the actor in these movies. To me, I'll always remember her from Seven, because that movie is superior to any Marvel movie she's in. But Tony Stark definitely carries this movie. He's probably my favorite Marvel character, and this movie, he is great. But the movie is not great. The first Captain America movie doesn't get as much hate as I thought it would. I mean, this movie is really not that good. Captain America has never been one of my favorite characters. I don't think he's too interesting, and I don't think he has an interesting personality. He doesn't bounce off other characters well either, and this movie has the worst of that. There's no character in this movie that Steve has an interesting relationship with. I don't like Peggy or Bucky in this movie. I like Bucky as a Winter Soldier, but not as a regular guy. The first part of this movie, before Steve turns strong, is painful. It's incredibly boring. It gets better, but it never gets to that next level. Avengers Age of Ultron is one of the most ambitious Marvel movies. It tries to do so much stuff, but in the end it becomes an overcrowded mess. The redeeming factor for this movie is that all the characters are great. The main Avengers are always entertaining, especially Iron Man and the Hulk. And then Vision, Ultron, Wanda, and Quicksilver were added. They were all great. But Hawkeye was actually really good in this one. They gave him a lot of development. My problem with this movie is that there's way too much going on. They introduced tons of new things into the movie. There's tons of action scenes, all of them not being very good. There's no breaks, it's just non-stop action and twists, and it just feels like too much. Even if Iron Man 3 is dumb and has tons of idiotic parts, at least you can't deny that it is entertaining. It's a very fun movie. It just has a lot of story flaws. My biggest flaw is the villain. The Mandarin wasn't interesting when he was a mass murdering terrorist who only showed up on TV. And then he ended up being a loser and an actor. And the real Mandarin was some old nerd who looked up to Iron Man. He's basically like Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, an even worse movie. But the fight scenes are so entertaining. And the scene where Tony saves the people on the plane is one of my favorite Marvel moments. And to nobody's surprise, Tony is amazing. I mean, he is so entertaining. Black Widow is one of the weirdest Marvel movies. It takes place around Captain America Civil War, but it was released in 2021. It should have been released 5 years ago, but it was made after she died, which means that we're never going to see any more development from her again, which is why it is strange that this movie was even made. But the overall film is not terrible. It's entertaining, introduces some pretty good characters, adds on to Black Widow, even if we will not see her again, and the action scenes are pretty good too. But my main flaw for this movie was the villain, or just the conflict in general. He's terrible and gets no screen time. I'd even go as far as saying he's the worst villain since Malekith. I also do not like the Red Guardian character at all. Honestly, Natasha and Yelena stole the show and were the best part. Captain Marvel is a movie that gets too much hate in my opinion. I don't think it's that bad. Now, would I watch it again? No, I definitely wouldn't. But some people think it's one of the worst Marvel movies, but I just think it's pretty average. I didn't hate Captain Marvel. I thought she was fairly interesting, and obviously Nick Fury is amazing. He is definitely the best part, and he's honestly one of my favorite Marvel characters. I also thought Talos was interesting, and I didn't see the plot twist coming, but I did not like the Supreme Intelligence. The scientist girl was awkward, and I hated every time she was on screen. The first 30 minutes or so before they get to Earth are also very boring, but overall the movie is really not that bad. Ant-Man and the Wasp is the most average movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It has some great moments and some bad moments. The main characters are decent, but definitely not the best of the MCU. The villains are average to below average. This movie is mostly a MacGuffin story though, which it does fairly well. This movie is still pretty average though, and I will never watch it again. The second Guardians of the Galaxy movie is hilarious. It can be messy, and there's some pretty weird and unnecessary scenes, especially the catch scene, which I think is very weird. The final battle is not the best. There's some cool moments, but it could have been handled better. But this might be the funniest Marvel movie. Drax is honestly the highlight of the movie. He is hilarious every time he's on screen. And of course Rocket and Groot are awesome as well. And obviously Yondu's death scene is one of the best in the franchise. While Guardians 2 is around a C-tier movie, Ant-Man is a B-tier movie, which means I think it's noticeably better than the previous film on the list. I actually like Scott and think he's one of the better Marvel protagonists. I think he's funny, and his growth as a hero and a father is very fun to watch. I also like Hope and Pym as well. I like how this movie is so low scale, instead of world-affecting events happening with aliens and other insane things. It's just about a former criminal trying to redeem himself. Also, this movie is hilarious and has so many funny moments. I think Paul Rudd is a very funny guy. You know, that kind of guy who is just naturally funny? I feel like he's that kind of guy. I also think he has great chemistry with everyone in the film. This movie, while not a masterpiece, is still very entertaining. Doctor Strange is a pretty good movie. It's nothing special, but it's enjoyable enough and is a good origin story. Doctor Strange is one of my favorite characters in the MCU, and this is the movie that made him one of my favorites. I see a lot of people say that this is super similar to the original Iron Man, And I can see why people say that, but I can't agree. I mean, this movie is so visually interesting, and there's so many creative ideas that I can't say that this ripped it off or anything like that. I mean, this is one of the most creative Marvel movies, which is honestly why this movie ranks as high as it does. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings was honestly way better than I thought it would be. I went in expecting it to be a 6 out of 10 movie, but I came out very happy and I thought it was great. I thought the main cast of characters were great and played off each other very well. I also thought Wenwu was a great villain, maybe even the best since Thanos. He had an interesting motive and I liked that he wasn't really evil. He was just delusional and couldn't get over his wife's death. And that final battle sequence is so good. That whole scene was phenomenal and the action and emotion was amazing. In fact, this movie's action is one of the best in the entire universe, if not the best. The choreography was great and the weapons were creative and cool. Black Panther is a movie I consider pretty overrated. I think it's a really good movie, which is why it's in number 12, but I don't think it's a masterpiece like a lot of other people. Everyone complains about the effects and how they're bad, and honestly, I can't say I disagree. The final fight in this movie is honestly one of the worst in the MCU. It looks ugly, and the best part is when Killmonger dies. That looked really good. The saving point for this movie was the Black Panther. He's a great character, and it's great seeing him develop and learn about the hidden past of Wakanda. A lot of people really like Killmonger, but I don't think he's that good of a villain. He's not bad, but I don't consider him one of the best Marvel villains. And the "what are those" joke also knocks it a spot down. Having Captain America and the Winter Soldier at number 11 is probably the most unpopular opinion in this video. Every time I watch a Marvel ranking, which keep in mind is like 2 times, they put this movie in the top 5. But I honestly just don't see it. Like I stated before, I'm not a Captain America fan, and in this movie he really pissed me off. And I don't really care about Steve and Bucky because the first movie didn't give them enough screen time for me to really care about their friendship. Also, Black Widow is very weird in this movie. I like her in most other movies, but in this one she was very awkward. But while this movie is not as high as it is for others, I still think it's a great movie. It's way more smart and intense than a lot of other Marvel movies. It's kind of like a spy thriller rather than a superhero movie, which I do like. Kicking off the top 10 is Captain America: Civil War. Just like the Winter Soldier, I don't think this is as good as others believe it is. I think the Captain America trilogy is one of the weaker franchises in the MCU, which I know is unpopular, but I just don't see the appeal of this movie like other people see. But I still like this one, mostly because it doesn't only focus on Captain America and Bucky, but also has Iron Man and all the other Avengers. And I'm sure you already realized that I really like the other Avengers, especially Tony. Tony is the best part of this movie. He's as great as always, but this movie focuses more on his past and leaves us with a different opinion on the character. Zemo's plan is full of conveniences, which is a huge flaw I have with this movie, but other than that, this movie is really good. Spider-Man: Far From Home is the first time I get to talk about Spider-Man in the video. I think he's a pretty good Spider-Man. He's the perfect mix of the hero and a teenage kid trying to maintain a steady social life. I know Tobey fans are gonna get mad, but I like this Spider-Man better than his. When talking about the movies, I think this one is the weakest of the trilogy, but it is still an extremely fun and entertaining movie. Mysterio is one of my favorite Marvel villains, mostly because Jake Gyllenhaal did such a good job with the character. He was intimidating, and you could really not tell that he was evil, unless you know who Mysterio was before the movie, of course. He's actually one of my favorite actors, mostly because the movie Donnie Darko is one of my personal favorites. The original Avengers is still a great movie in almost every way. Its action is amazing, all the characters have development and fleshing out. They also all bounce off each other so well and have great chemistry. The main villain is great. He has an interesting plan and personality, and we've already seen him, which means we care more about him. The main plot is hooking and interesting. This movie is amazing. I can't really say I have any flaws with this film, other than maybe the middle part got kinda boring and dragged on for too long. There was definitely parts where I was kinda bored, but mostly it is a great movie. Spider-Man Homecoming is a great movie and a very entertaining one. This movie has its own kind of vibrant and electric style, and it just sucks you in. Spider-Man has such great relationships with everyone else in the movie. Everyone is so fun, and you can't help but love every character. Another thing I really like about this movie is that it's very different from other Spider-Man movies. There's no origin, or Harry, or anything traditional. It has its own kind of style, and I personally think it was a great idea, and it fits perfectly with the MCU as a whole. And when the movie needs to get serious, it does it well. The scene where Peter lifts the rock is amazing, and when Peter and Vulture were in the car, it was so tense and it was awesome. The newest Marvel movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, was an incredibly entertaining movie that left everyone happy in one way or another. There's gonna be spoilers, but I assume you've seen the movie by now. I think it was a great idea to bring back other beloved characters. I thought that the premise and idea was great because it left room for so many moments that were memorable. Tobey and Andrew were really great, and so was Tom Holland. But honestly, I think Andrew stole the show. I think people are starting to realize that he's an amazing actor. I mean, watch movies like The Social Network where he was awesome. And with all this new recognition, I think people are starting to realize that. I think the ending was actually really good because it really made Peter face his mistakes. All this is because of him, and he will definitely learn from it in the future. I thought this one was great, so let's get into the top 5, which are some of my favorite superhero movies. Starting the top 5 is the original Iron Man. The one that started it all is better than almost all the other ones. It's an engaging, hooking, funny, and epic origin story. Looking back at it, it's really surprising how big this whole MCU thing became. I mean, this movie had no right to kick off a universe that would still be popular 14 years in the future. But it makes sense because this movie is great. Tony is amazing in every movie he's in. He's hilarious, has great character development, and you can't help but appreciate everything he's done. Honestly, the villain and the main story was not the best. To me, this movie is so good because it is the growth of Tony. He goes from an arrogant prick to a hero who saves tons of people. It's simple and low scale, but it is great. I think that Guardians of the Galaxy is the most entertaining Marvel movie ever created. It's hilarious, has great creative characters that have such good chemistry. The setting and all the planets are so fun, and the world just sucks you in and really makes you care. And I really do care about the Guardians. They're all so lovable, and you can't help but want to see them succeed and live good lives. And the soundtrack of this movie is one of the better Marvel soundtracks. This one and Iron Man were fighting for the number 4 spot, but I ended up giving it to this, just because of how entertaining it is. Going into the top 3, my first movie is Avengers Endgame. I'm sure most people probably have this at 1 or 2, but I can't put it above 1 and 2. But this movie is still awesome. I honestly don't think you could have asked for a better payoff after a decade of building up. Seeing Iron Man die was so painful for me because I enjoyed his character so much, but in the end he died in the coolest way possible, so it could have been worse. The whole final hour of this film is filled with fan service and fun, and it ends up being so entertaining and epic. The build up to the final fight was not as good, but it was still good. This movie had the best Captain America in my opinion. He was great, and it ended his character arc in the best way imaginable. Honestly, Thor Ragnarok is probably my favorite Marvel movie. It's not the best, but if I had a choice to watch any film for the rest of my life, I would definitely choose this. I mean, it is so fun. It's colorful and funny. The main character has so much personality. Thor is easily the most improved character. I mean, they really changed everyone's opinion on this guy. Before Ragnarok, he was one of my least favorites, but now I would say he is one of my favorites. Every time he's on screen, it's so fun and I just can't get enough of it. This movie is one of the most epic movies in the MCU. The final fight where Thor discovers his power is such a great sequence, and the immigrant song in the background made it even more epic. I think Avengers Infinity War is genuinely one of the best sci-fi movies in the last few years. Actually, probably ever. I mean, it is a perfect sci-fi movie. And it's even better if you're a Marvel fan because it takes all these characters they've been building up on for a decade and gives them great arcs and combines them all together. Once again, Iron Man is a star here, and I like that they backed down from Steve and all those guys, because honestly, Iron Man is my favorite part about this universe. And actually, I was wrong. The real star is Thanos. Thanos is miles better than any other Marvel villain. I mean, he is awesome and has such a compelling character arc. Honestly, I couldn't help but root for Thanos because they just made him such a great character. And when you want the villain to win, you know he's a great villain. And I haven't even mentioned how good the characters work together, especially Tony and Doctor Strange. This movie is the closest we'll get to a perfect Marvel movie. Well, I've officially ranked all of the MCU movies worst to best, and this took a very long time, so I'd appreciate if you could like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on Dr. FC.